Well, I was going to say good morning, but good afternoon. Fáilte Cardia? Oh, that's good. Half of the room are happy, and the rest don't know what I'm saying. You're very, very welcome to this exhibition on the history of Albert Street. We've all kinds of different people here who have connections to the area and to the congregation, and we're delighted that you've come to this exhibition, but also specifically today to this book launch. After this, there will be something to eat through in the main hall, and there you are. Not only, Dinker, are you getting a free book or two, you're getting free lunch. So whoever said, yeah, if you'd have put that, would have been packed out. But we're delighted to welcome you all here. This is part of the Presbyterian Church's reconnection with the area. You remember that our Presbyterian churches in the area closed one by one over the years of the Troubles, but we're now re-engaging with the area, and we're delighted at the welcome and friendship that we've received from so many people in so many parts of life here. But the main business of today is the launch of this book. It's really the relaunch of this book. Jake, who's going to speak in a moment, will tell you about this book, but the original print run have all disappeared, and we had to do more. And the man behind this book is Jake. His name doesn't appear anywhere. That's the story of Jake's life. He's always in the background doing things, but very effectively. And I'm going to ask him if he would say a few words by way of introduction to the book before I ask our main speaker to speak to us today. So can I ask you to give Jake a big round of applause?
Well, who can I David? Into Joshua Ackle, a scav Jabra, Neil, so I'm involved in microphone a year, I'm involved, Kai my Lord West. Neil? Cartwad, Tussa Gold Road Big Bora again. I'm a Falcha Road, was Falcha Akahariha, River, and Dr. John Kirkpatrick, was Van John at Hanshaw, and who's Cardiantrama, Lesson Lower Shaw, Alanchal. Johnny Misha Moran, I'll not say a lot, you're all very, very welcome. It's great to see you, and great to see such a mix. Somebody sorted the microphone out, thank God. I'd particularly like to welcome the former moderator, Dr. John Kirkpatrick, who's blown in from the Wales Antrim, the Slopes of Slamish, along with his good wife Joan, to help us launch this book. The book itself, the origins of all of these projects that Forbert's Forest has been engaged in since the 1990s have been to free the Irish language. And I got this, we invited Sir George Quigley onto the Falls Road back in 2005, I think, way back then. And he came in to launch the Gaeltacht Quarter Lecture. And he said that it was his ardent hope that the Irish language and culture, which he so appreciated, could be freed from the negative space of conflict and could be used as a tool to re-engage people who had been estranged for so long, and that they could do so in ways which promoted cultural promiscuity. Now there's one for you, Mickey. I'm not quite sure how far you go with cultural promiscuity, but this is a promiscuous enough group here. We have engaged with the Presbyterian Church since 2018, really. And it was in the lead into the 130th anniversary of the opening of Broadway Presbyterian, which became an Irish language centre. And in the anniversary year, which would have been 2021, the church would be 130 years old and the cultural land would be 30. So we come up with a project called Celebrating Custodianship. And what that looked at was, this town's full of wonderful buildings and they've been used for different purposes in different eras. So I said, what about if we, when we're celebrating 30 years of the existence of an Irish language centre in this church, the church only closed in 1982. I remember Broadway as a Presbyterian church, a working Presbyterian church. And so what we did was we set off and we tracked down the daughter of the last minister. We tracked down the bell, which was in the church. we took it to Cork, got it recast, and then had a big gathering where we rang the bell and said that was ringing in a series of engagements between communities which had been separated not just by physical barriers but by mental barriers for so long. So I'm delighted to relaunch this book. It's expanded, and we've had to do some corrections. I'll not mention whose piece had to be corrected, but he's not here. And he's recently been made a doctor of Queen's University for his work to history. So if you can work that out, you'll know who he is. So look, without much further ado, just bwailim fáilte chuir of David leis an Ear Orvanach agus an Ear Mónior de English Presbyterian na Heran a Horthugging.
David? Okay, thank you, Jake. The book is bilingual, and it's bilingual because of Jake. He has translated everything for us, and we really, really appreciate that. Not only putting the book together in such a beautiful form, but in making it accessible to both languages. We really appreciate that, Jake. Well, in thinking about launching this today, we were wondering who we would ask, and almost the first name that came to our mind was John Kirkpatrick. John has been a moderator of the Presbyterian Church. To put that in other people's terms, he's like the Archbishop, but we only let them do 1 year because we don't trust them, it goes to the mind. So every moderator becomes an ex-moderator very quickly, and you're not the only one in the room today, but we appreciate your interest in this area. We know that you have connections with this area and a real love for the people of this area, and so we appreciate very much you and Joan taking the time to come. There's a connection to us as well, because when Elaine was a youngster a while ago, she was in a church where John and Joan were working over in East Belfast. So there's a wee link with us personally. So we're delighted that you're here. And John, I'd like you to just say a few words at the launch of this book. Thank you. Give him a round of applause, please.
Well, I hope someday I would be able to address you in Irish, but I'm not fluent enough yet in that. I have been working on it now since I retired from my local congregation last year. Has given me time. I have a friend here, Brian. Brian over here lives in this part of the city, and he and I text in Irish. So that's where we're at the moment, and I'm slowly working my way, but I'm not confident enough in it. I do love languages, and I think languages are very, very important, and that we as nations, whoever we are, hold on to our languages. And I travelled a lot in Europe for our church, and I really see how they appreciate their languages in the countries like Hungary, Romania, and Czech and Slovak. And we value ours, but we need to value it right across the island the way we should. But I want to begin just to say, first of all, thank you for all who've been involved in the publication of this book. I've read it through a couple of times, and I appreciate that the investment and interest that has been given in something that is, as it were, Presbyterian, but by those who are not all Presbyterians. And therefore, I appreciate the generosity of heart that has gone into it, into the research and into the publication of this. And that's really important. And in itself, it really shows the spirit that we have met when we've come back to the West, and that we would like to continue to express from our own denomination here. I was interested in the introduction that the line was, we are finding new ways of assessing the past and tracing potential connections with a future that everyone can enjoy and benefit from. And those words resonated with me in my thinking about this, because I wanted to begin with a story from the past. 2 years ago in Nashville, I met Brian Connolly here. Brian was there at a musical event, and he and I were at the same event. And it was a Christian event, and it was interesting. It was a massive event, but that wasn't really what struck. We struck up a friendship, and that was more important, because relationships are the things that outlast all the events often in our lives. So when I came back, and Brian gave me a tour of the West, as he would call it, which is interesting, because I've been up and down the Falls Road on numbers of occasions on all sorts of different types of things, but I saw it through his eyes, and that was very important. I also got an invitation to go to St Mary's University, and Professor Peter Finn was there. Nice to see him here today. And again, little connections like that were just beginning to open up my eyes and heart to this city. And then my wife one day decided she would do a bit of research, and she is, I call her, she's the demon for research and development. If you give her a little matter, she'll drill into it until she finds it. Anyway, I had always been on the understanding that my mother's family had come from the islands, somewhere in Scottish Islands. The reason I didn't know too much, my father had left us when I was 3 years of age, so I hadn't a lot of connection to that side, my grandmother's side on his side. But when Joan did a bit of research, she discovered that my great-grandfather was actually from Elm Street and had been a miller working here in this part of the city, and his name was Adam Keenan. I don't think he was a Presbyterian, but that's my story, and I was interested to discover that little bit of history because then Brian took me down to meet his aunt who lives in the sort of the same area, and we talked about all the people who had lived around here and the stories that were there, and all of a sudden it started to become more personal to me, especially when I discovered, linking in with Tom Hartley's research and so on, that my great-grandfather is buried in the Falls Road Cemetery. And that, of course, ties you very much to a place where your folks are buried. It's very precious to you, especially in Ireland. And so that is an interesting story that has somewhat surprised me and has also taught me, very importantly, our past is important to us. And here, of course, in Ireland, we know how our past can be a problem, depending on how we look at it. If we let the past maybe shape us in the wrong way, we tend to go in the wrong way. And I think that we're in a new day, and I'm glad to see there are new winds blowing across this island that are really encouraging. And last year, when Joan and I travelled around the whole of the country, visited all sorts of corners and places and all sorts of people to represent our denomination, we got insights and we got opportunities to get a sense of the breadth of the good that is in this island, and in a sense that opened our eyes, I think, to the possibilities to really see a new day for the church. Ireland is synonymous with Christianity in many ways. We know that our history is deeply steeped in Christian tradition. And today it's a secular island, becoming more and more secular. We know that when we look at the figures of attendance at church or for Mass or wherever across the island, unless in some pockets, it's an island that is looking at a past time of faith, and today faith is not so real for people. So when I got this and started to read about this, I was moved particularly by the spirit in which this was written, in its welcome, its generosity, and its respect towards something that was in the past, but now we are hoping might lead to something for the future. The journey that led Tom Hartley from the dead to the living, I would describe it, from the graveyards, to lead him to investigate the lives of the people as they had been, was something that I think helped me certainly to see myself and my tradition as others see us, which is really important. And I suspect that some people are nervous when they think they're going to be given a little bit from how others see them. We don't always like it, we're nervous, but he was generous and he was kind. For far too long, many of us have lived in the echo chambers of our own assumptions, where we really don't hear much from other people and we don't listen to what they're saying. Among the dead that Tom has brought back to life are a people that really encapsulate a history that we as Presbyterians can benefit from as well. I suspect there are lots of Presbyterians would learn a great deal from reading this book that they don't know about their history in this city and the part that they have played in the past. It's accurate whenever he concluded that Presbyterianism is in a deep tension. I kind of like that. I think to live in deep tension is to embrace the Christian faith as it is. We are all doubting Thomases at some level, in a sense. We understand much, but not everything. And it was Jim Struthers, who gave context to this, I think, in his article and his section in it. Geographically, across the narrow sea, historically, living out their faith in some of the most turbulent times. Politically, the 17th to the 20th century in Europe was a time of great change. Philosophically, from the Reformation to the Enlightenment, modernism to secularism. It's an amazing time that we have been living through in this island as a denomination. But Jim explains what anchors us in our changing times. It's not just structure, for he does tell us about all the structures of the Presbyterian Church. And as one of those who maybe is a bit of an outlier always in the structures, people would call me, I kind of try and work my way outside the structure sometimes, and yet we manage to make our progress within them. But he has described not just the structures that anchor us, but that we are a people who believe in a story, the one big story in Scripture, in the Bible. The Bible is very precious to Presbyterians, as I know it is precious to all Christians in this island and across the world. But maybe it has a place in our denomination that maybe is slightly more central than in every other denomination, not necessarily all, but in some. But as we think about the future, the present and the future, reading David's story was moving and honest and personal, and it reflects that multitude of personal stories that go to make up the Presbyterian story today and in the past. I must say that I could understand and sense that there were a number of key moments in David's life. He describes them as seminal times when opportunity and choice collided together, maybe in an uncomfortable way, because God has a way of doing that, of creating opportunities and then causing us to make choices when we're confronted with certain truths about ourselves or circumstances that he brings us into. And we Presbyterians believe really powerfully in the providence of God, his kind and clear directing of life, and it is he who has brought us to this time. So actually here this afternoon, we are part of a providential story. You are writing a few lines in another part, in a new chapter, I think. Now, I appreciate Tom Hartley's comments when he says, and I quote him, "If we cannot physically see a congregation or its place of worship historically, we become deaf to its narrative." It's a profound statement that, I thought, and I've reflected on that. For I know that it's not just the buildings that make up the life. They are the place where often the life has been nurtured and from which it has also gone out into the community. But they are important. So today, it is a cause of great thanks to me that we have set on this present journey to bring a living presence of Presbyterians back into the West, as I think of it. We have learnt from the past. We have learnt a lot from our past, especially those of us who are maybe of my generation, and I would think David's as well, so that we come here humbly, we come to listen, and we come to appreciate, we come to value the culture that exists in this part of the city. We come to serve and to live out those two cardinal principles of loving God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and in loving our neighbour. The two are so intricately bound up together. And I think that this publication is a step on that journey, helping us to move in that direction. And it is in that spirit that I highly commend this book to you, and also commend the vision that God has put on David's heart, and which has been embraced by us in our denomination, and I know is also increasingly being embraced by many in this part of Belfast. So thank you so much.